I was working with a shaman, and I was telling her about my book and my intention for the book and kind of my wish to be able to touch more people than I'm able to like have an impact on just seeing patients one-to-one in my office. And she said, she really took issue with that. And she said, you have no idea the impact that you have working with people one-to-one. Something changes because of your work with them, and then they change in some kind of way, and that affects their family, and then that affects somebody else. And since she said that to me, I mean, she was really kind of stern as she said this to me. And like, I think part of it was that she was feeling like I wasn't valuing enough what I was doing just in my practice. But since she said that to me, patients have been just saying to me again and again, in all kinds of different ways, what a difference I've made.
Welcome to Connecting with Coincidence. I am your host, Bernie Beitman. I'm a psychiatrist, and lo and behold, I'm talking with a psychiatrist today. Doesn't happen too often, and it's a wonderful experience and possibility for me and for you, because you get to look at people who have been trained in traditional ways in pretty good institutions, who are getting into the strangeness that synchronicity points us towards. Meanwhile, please subscribe to this channel. It really helps tickle the algorithm. Please buy my book, Meaningful Coincidences, and like this channel, because that helps too. And if you feel moved to do it, message me about this interview or any other interview that you happen to run across. It's really fun to see some of the comments, and I get occasional trolls, which is fun too, just to see what they are up to. Well, our guest today, as I mentioned, is a psychiatrist. Her name is Judy Tsafrir. She's a holistic Tsafrir is a holistic healer, activist, artist, gardener with a private practice of holistic psychiatry and psychoanalysis located in Newton, Massachusetts. She's board certified in adult and child psychiatrist and is a psychoanalyst on the faculty of Harvard Medical School and the Boston Psychoanalytic Institute. These are really good things in this traditional way that someone has done, and she has. She's also a practitioner of astrology, tarot, shamanism, body intuitiveness, Reiki. It's a lot of stuff. Her new book, Sacred Psychiatry, Bridging the Personal and Transpersonal to Transform Health and Consciousness. There it is.
Oh, that's not my book. That's not my book.
Oh, that's not your book. I have it over here. I didn't look. There's your book. There's your book, Sacred Psychiatry. Sacred Psychiatry by Judy Tsafrir. And it's a good read and tells you a lot of stuff that's really important in generally taking care of your health, as well as some psychiatric suggestions and ideas. I was interested in the chapter on energy vampires, but I don't think we're going to get into that for various reasons today. But it's worth looking at that chapter as well. So welcome to Connecting with Coincidence, Judy. Glad to have you with me.
Thank you. I'm happy to be here with you.
Well, just as we were talking about at the beginning, you started describing a synchronicity that just happened. So I think we got a lot going on in there. So let's start with that story.
Okay, so one of the modalities of treatment that I offer in my practice is ketamine-assisted psychotherapy, which is ketamine is the only legal psychedelic in Massachusetts, and I was seeing a patient for the 5th of 6 sessions of this ketamine treatment. And I do the ketamine sessions in a ceremonial and sacred way. So in the beginning, I call in the ancestors and the spirit guides and the directions. And I also set up an altar that I put objects on that I am somehow called to place on the altar. It's sort of like sacred space, and the patient is also invited to bring in their own objects to put on the altar. And often it becomes part of the journey and what we talk about. So I was preparing for her to come, and I just went to this china cabinet that I have in the room that I was doing the session in, and I pulled out this figure that actually was from my grandmother. Um, it was a figure made in Germany, a china figure of this very graceful woman, sort of posture in old-fashioned clothes, dancing. Her dress is purplish, and I put it on the altar. And in the previous session, the patient had talked about meeting an Indian girl, a young girl who was there, and she subsequently realized that the girl wasn't Indian, but was actually a gypsy. And it caused her to research pictures of gypsies, and she found a picture of a 19th century drawing of a gypsy woman dancing that she had brought to show me. And the posture of the woman in the picture was identical to the posture of the figure that I had placed on the altar. And that kind of synchronicity and that kind of connection between the patient and me just creates a level of rapport and a feeling that we're on the same wavelength, that we're really attuned to one another, and just creates a great deal of trust and confidence and kind of excitement as well,
Yeah,
because it's so out of the ordinary.
it's so out of the ordinary, and it it means you're on the same wavelength. And
Mhm.
uh, one time had a patient. I had a patient who was very, we had a pretty good connection, and we laughed a bunch in our sessions. And I bought these blue framed glasses. Uh, the frame was blue, and I kind of a radiating blue, and I wore them to my session with her, but the way my office was set up, my back was to her when she came in. So I had to turn around from my desk. So I turned around with these blue glasses, waiting for her. What are you doing? And for the first time ever, and the only time ever, she also wore glasses that day. It meant we were looking at things the same way. And
Yeah,
I call it, it's not a pair of glasses synchronicity, it's a pair of glasses synchronicity, just
yeah,
playing with the terms. And that's similar to what you've described. And one of the major principles of synchronicity is that they can be amazing experiences, as yours was, as what mine was, but they also are experiences that other people are currently having or have had or will have. So it's an example, your story and mine in its own analog, of something that happens between patients and therapists, as well as other people, but patients and therapists is a kind of a loaded place for synchronicities to happen. So why don't you tell us then what happened, what it meant to you? You started to tell us about that, what it meant to your patient, and then you were going to talk about cards that you also used.
right. So there's been a lot of themes in this uh, series of sessions that I've done with this patient about the masculine and about the feminine. And there was some kind of way in which I felt called to support a kind of divine feminine energy with her. And I actually made this tea beforehand that I used hibiscus flowers and rose for, because that also felt somehow in keeping. And I put some flowers on the altar, which I haven't done before. And so that was my intent with it. For the patient, the gypsy girl represented something joyful and playful, and that one could have responsibilities, but not be weighed down by them and still be joyful. So she had a different, it meant something different to her than to me. But we also often use oracle cards before the session. And so oracle cards are just a deck of cards. It doesn't have any particular structure, but they can have a theme. So the theme of this oracle deck was actually, that's not right. It was a tarot deck. It was a tarot deck that was themed about trees. And so she pulled this card that was the Four of Nuts, which was nuts in this deck is what Pentacles is in a classic tarot deck. And the card that she pulled was Hickory. And the symbolism of it was, again, the same thing as with the gypsy girl, that it's not the need to have like the weight of the world on your shoulders, that it's possible to kind of let go of things. And there were a lot of themes for her about her children are basically young adults and launched, and letting go of feeling so responsible and kind of having her own life and her own important life apart from her children.
Did letting go mean anything to you?
Well, I identified with what she was trying to wrap her mind around, with having children who also were now young adults and who didn't need me in the same way and who are in their lives. And just the importance of having your own important life that doesn't revolve around being their mother.
And for you?
That was the same for me.
Same for you.
Like
Okay.
I felt that. I felt that, like I identified with that card. I mean, it's very often the case when you use oracle cards that the card that is pulled is not just for the querent, but is also for the other people involved.
And so it is when therapists say things to their patients.
Absolutely, 100%, 100%. We're speaking from our own experience and what's meaningful to us, where we put our focus.
Yeah, and so we select out in our patients stuff that we're dealing with ourselves, and
Totally.
it's not all the time, of course. And then every once in a while on this show, what is going on with the person I'm talking with is also going on with me.
Yes.
So I'll add a third person to the letting go, namely me. I've been in a relationship that it has been the most intense love I've ever felt for anyone, and the sine wave of life has gone to the pinnacle, down to like letting go time. And the process of letting go is has a joyous element to it, a longing for what was, and a longing for what I thought could be or felt what might be, but for various reasons called reality, it has nothing. It's not. It's not going to go anyplace. And so somebody sent me a statement that had to do on my birthday, which was when this letting go with this other person was starting to happen, about the value of letting go and how when you let go, and that lets more opportunities come in.
Absolutely, 100%. One of my favorite tarot cards is the Hanged Man, and he's hanging upside down. And um, like one of the meanings of that card is having like open hands, because if you're holding on to something, nothing can come in. Like you have to have open hands to receive, and you have to tolerate not knowing and being in between.
Oh, that space between, man. That's getting to be a big thing. It's called a synapse in some languages between two neurons, a receiver and a sender. But that space in between, there's a lot of activity that takes place in that space between. There's a lot of potential in that space between, and I think that's what you're describing. Letting go opens up that space between. But the hangman is who I identify with in tarot cards
Really?
most often with. Yes.
I
It's
made a painting of that one,
how come?
of the because I also identified with the Hanged Man. At least it's particularly at that point in my life when I painted it.
Yeah.
And I think it also had to do at that time with being kind of between relationships, you know.
The hangman has very different sound to me, at least the way I thought about it. Is the hangman in my deck, the Book of Thoth, the tarot card
Oh yeah.
of Aleister Crowley. Yes, the hands are open, but they're pinned on a grid, and the body is in a grid on a grid, but the mind is in a different space. So it's both being in this regular reality at the same time, also getting to more cosmic consciousness, and being a bridge between the two, which is what I tend to be doing, and I think you're doing, is a conduit from ideas in higher consciousness to this reality.
Right. And another meaning of the Hanged Man is like he's hanging upside down, and other people think that like what is he doing? That looks like crazy. But he kind of knows what he's doing. Like he believes in what he's doing, and it doesn't matter that people think that he's crazy.
Ah,
Hmm.
the crazy psychiatrist, huh? That's that's that's
To have courage of your convictions and to be your authentic self.
yeah. Well, you've been looking at tarot cards for a while now,
Yeah, since I was in college.
since you were in college.
Hmm.
How did you get started with them? And as both of us uh, are intrigued by how they work.
Hmm.
So, could you talk about those two aspects?
Well, I think that somebody showed me a deck, and I was like, oh, that looks really interesting. And I'm somebody who's very drawn to images and to symbols and to archetypes. So, like, I was right away intrigued. And I mean, I don't know really how they work, but just like I don't know how astrology works, but I see that they do, and that there is a correspondence between the cards that are pulled and what is meaningful or on the mind of the person who is asking. And I don't see them as predictive, just as I don't see astrology as predictive. But I do think that the universe gives us messages through them, and that's something. And generally, like I use the cards almost daily, and the question that I ask almost every day is the same, like, what does the universe want me to know? And so then I'll get a card or several cards if I'm pulling from different decks or doing a spread. And I'll reflect upon the message that I intuit from the card, and I'll work with it. And sometimes, it doesn't seem like I don't get it. But most of the time it feels like, wow, that is really really helpful. That really helps me look at this in another way. It emphasizes what's important. Sometimes you keep pulling the same card again and again. It's just uncanny. It defies any statistical odds. I was diagnosed with osteoporosis, and I was using this herbal astrology deck, and I kept pulling this card, horsetail, which is a herb that strengthens bones. It's just very interesting. I actually tried it, and it didn't agree with me, but it just kept coming up.
They were trying, but they didn't quite get the right one. What was your card for today?
Today, I haven't pulled a card yet. Today, I have not pulled a card.
Do you have your deck? Do you have your deck around?
I could run and get it. I mean, I have a million decks.
Well, one that you might find that would be useful for today.
For us?
Uh-huh.
For us? Well, let me give you a choice, okay? I have a very cool animal deck. I have a tree deck. I have herbal decks. I have decks that are related to the chakra system.
I have made my choice.
Okay, which one?
Tree deck.
Tree deck. Okay, I'll be right back, okay? You want to start? So you made a great choice. This is a very beautiful deck and book. It's called the Tree Spirit Tarot. And I really like what she writes about things. So this is what I would suggest that we do, that I'll shuffle the deck and you focus upon, I would say, the question, what does the universe want you to know, or whatever else you'd like to ask. And you'll tell me when to stop. And I'll stop and I'll pull the first card, and then we'll see what the universe wants you to know, or whatever it is that you ask.
Okay.
So you got a nut card, which is in the classic tarot, that is it's a nut tree, but in the classic tarot it's pentacles, which has to do with earth and kind of material things and resources, both all kinds of resources, spiritual, emotional, material, and it's the chestnut tree, and provider. So it's a guardian. So it must be one of the it's one of the court cards. So it would be the knight. It would be the Knight of Pentacles, So in the classic tarot, do you know what that looks like? It's like this knight holding this pentacle, and he's different than the other knights. All the knights in the other suits are much more impetuous and impulsive and adolescent. He's more solid. He's more kind of deliberate, and in a way, a little bit older for his age. So the Guardian of Nuts.
Can you show the picture?
So this is this card. I don't have the other deck.
That's the card.
That's the card, yes.
Okay.
The Guardian of Nuts.
The Guardian of Nuts. Okay.
So it would be the King of Pentacles in the Knight of Pentacles in the classic tarot.
Yeah,
the Knight of Pentacles.
I know what that looks like.
Okay. So, I mean, do you want me to read the whole thing about the chestnut tree, or do you want me to just read the message?
I'm going to tell you what I was thinking about.
Okay.
And let's see how the message matches that, rather than going the other way around.
All right. All right. All right.
I'm in the process of writing on my fourth coincidence book. This is a little bit more than that, and this is tentatively titled Psychotherapy for the Collective Human Organism. And what I was asking is some guidance about how to concretize this general idea into something that is readable, palpable, and doable.
I love the question. I love the question. I mean, just the question of the book, like psychotherapy for the collective human organism. That seems like so called for at this time on the planet, and also like a great thing for like a person who has lived a long time to think about, you know, like it's beautiful to me.
Thank you.
Okay. The message is, this is interesting. Chestnut signals a time when we are being asked to be a trustworthy and reliable provider from start to finish. This is also a time of paying attention to our own needs if we are to help others. We may need to pay closer attention to details to complete our tasks, no matter how mundane it may seem. True providers offer stability and kindness during difficult times that nourish the mind, body, and soul. So I mean, in a way, it seems like you're asking yourself, you want to provide something to humanity.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
And something reliable, you
Yeah.
know, something worthwhile from start to finish. And I guess it's asking you to pay attention to things that, I mean, that's a very high level question, but somehow you would be supported by paying attention to the mundane.
Yes. Yes. Yes, that's the hangman with his body in me, for me, on the grid of regular reality, and trying to get ideas from higher consciousness to bring down here, and that requires taking care of the body and the basic things like doing my income tax on this at this time to keep grounded is another way of saying that, but pay attention to the details of the present in order to do it. And part of the way of taking care of the details is by listening to stuff around me and taking it and putting it in the notes for the book.
Right.
That's where they come together in your description there.
Well, what I love, actually, given what you've just said, is the way that this author begins. She says, Chestnut signals a time of taking on responsibility of being a provider for the family or our community and ourselves. So you really do want to provide for the community, you know. Chestnuts belong to the Fabaceae family of trees, which include beech and oak. All three genera are generous providers of life-sustaining gifts. I mean, it sounds like your idea for your book has very much to do with like a life-sustaining gift for the planet.
That's the intent. Yeah, you got it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not as we have just done this, and you did with the dancers, and one very basic principle of synchronicity is mirroring.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's true in good psychotherapists can mirror the feelings of the patient. But this is another version of mirroring, so that mirroring is just what we just did with the tarot cards. There's reflections. And I'm going to ask you to think about that and talk about that mirroring thing that you are in the middle of, really, when you're interested in tarot cards and astrology. There's mirrors. You're looking at mirrors.
Right. Well, I mean, okay, I have so many thoughts. Like in psychology, the idea of mirroring is that the child sees themselves reflected in the parent's eye, or the parent sees themselves reflected in the child's eye. There's some kind of dyad going on where they're reflecting to one another some kind of understanding, like, oh, I see you're sad, or, oh, yes, that is funny. There's some kind of connection going on, some kind of reciprocity, some kind of mutuality. And when you have like these synchronous experiences with, let's say, with the tarot card or with the dancer, you feel like the universe is kind of winking at you, that there's some kind of way that you feel as though you're in the flow, and that you're part of a meaningful universe, that things are not random. And the same with astrology, like it's a very, very, very mysterious practice where there's like a correspondence between what is going on with the planets and their positions and their relationships to each other, and what is going on with human life on Earth. And like, we can't explain it rationally, but it is this kind of feeling that um, things make sense and are meaningful, and that there are patterns, and we're participating in that.
And when we see that we're participating in that, what then does it mean?
Well, I think that you feel a sense of belonging. You feel like you're not alone, that you're connected. It reinforces this sense of oneness.
I your analogy of a parent with a child resonates very deeply with me in this discussion. You're sad, you're happy, you're funny. How about I love you?
Yes, I mean, I love you, you love me. You know, we're connected. We're resonating with each other. We're feeling a sense of caring and warmth, and it's tremendously supportive of well-being.
And and ideally it reflects a mirror, even if the child can't say back, I love you. There's still the feeling in the child who receives the feeling of love from the parent.
Absolutely. And like, when you see, patients who haven't had that mirroring, and haven't had that sense of feeling loved, that there's just a lot of consequences for them in terms of the quality of their capacity to connect with other people and their relationship with themselves. And it's just fundamental for a feeling of wholeness and well-being.
And for those who have not had that experience growing up, it becomes difficult even to be held by someone.
Yes.
It's
Yes.
it,
And
it's it becomes easier to have sex with someone than to actually be held by someone.
or to just be admired, just be admired or applauded, rather than like intimately connecting. I know you, you know me. I understand you, you understand me. It's all about just like achievement and success and approval and applause,
And not about connection.
not about connection.
Yeah, and if you don't know it, if you haven't had it, then you don't know what you're missing. Although you do, because deep inside of each of us is that desire to love and be loved.
Agreed.
Well, this mirroring is really an important part of my ideas of the principles of synchronicity. And when we talk about a collective human organism psychotherapy, it's recognizing our each of us being mirrored by events around us. The cards being one example, you're with the dancers having the same form is another. That it begins to suggest we're much more connected with each other when you start seeing those mirrors.
Absolutely.
If there's ways in which this happens that are helpful to us, and why don't you tell us your mold toxin story?
Yeah, I'll tell you that, but I want to say just one thing
Okay,
before I
please
say that.
go ahead.
Like I love rituals and I love ceremonies. And so like you got that chestnut card. So like if I had gotten that chestnut card and it resonated with me, I would like eat some chestnuts, like I would think about, the message of the card and eat some chestnuts. Or I might find a chestnut tree and make an offering to it and say, please, chestnut tree, you know, thank you for your presence and your beauty and help me with my book. Like I would love your assistance. Like that's the kind of way that I like to interact with the universe. And it's and I think you might like it too, because I sense that you're really playful, because like you right away wanted me to like get the tarot cards and pull a card for you and be very present in the moment, like just seeing what unfolded if we did that, and kind of riffing off of it. So I appreciate that.
Well, you're
So
welcome. And I'm gonna add to that because I'm glad you you kept come back to the trees. I can't help chestnuts roasting over an open fire, Jack Frost nipping at your nose. Uh, that's a happy holiday song that even though I'm Jewish, I liked. It's just such it captures winter happiness so nicely, that chestnuts roasting, and that old chestnut is a phrase that uh, is like a truth that
yes,
sticks
yes,
around.
yes,
Uh,
yes, yes, yes. Yeah, a valuable truth that
uh,
um,
uh,
doesn't go out of style.
doesn't and that, I'm looking for old chestnuts for this book, really.
Mm-hmm,
It's the
mm-hmm.
kind of perennial ideas that have been around but are also here to be discovered, because they've been around a long time too, but haven't been paid enough attention to, at least in the Western mind. But to add to your ritual, and the reason, well, Dr. Beitman, why did you pick the tree set of cards? Might be a question a therapist might ask me. So I ask myself. And as many people who watch me talking about stuff in this on this show, is I talk with trees. I have
Oh,
I have a relationship with, I don't know, these three trees, and I think they're oak trees. I don't really ask, but I'm pretty sure they are. But in a forest 20 minutes from here, and I go visit them every other week when I can, and we have our conversations, and we dance sometimes. We form a rhombus where there's one in the back, then there's two, and then there's me. So we're a rhombus, which is four-sided, but the angles are sharper than 90 degrees. And we do the rhombus, is what I call it. We dance the rhombus together.
well, it sounds like that's a ritual with chestnuts would be right up your alley.
It is. That's because the chestnuts and oak trees just are there, as you said, are related to each other. That's why
Mhm.
I picked it. And looking for mirrors from the trees, that's a place we generally don't think of as a place for mirroring.
Mhm.
And I don't know. I really appreciate being able to elaborate on mirroring with you. If you had, I appreciate anything more you have to say about this general principle of mirroring.
Well, there's the interesting um, phenomena of mirror neurons, that I guess I don't really have that clear an understanding of it, but if they have like if they're studying the brains of two people and one person is having one experience, the other person's brains will light up in the same place, that they're somehow the neurons are mirroring each other, like on a physical level.
The story I remember, and I like it even if it wasn't true, is that they were putting electrodes on a bunch of monkeys in a cage, and they were doing stuff. I don't know what they were doing with them. So the researchers were taking a lunch break, and uh, the the researchers were eating. One of the researchers was eating lunch, and the monkey was watching him eating lunch, and somehow they were able to correlate the EEG of the monkey with the EEG of the researcher, and that was the beginning of understanding mirror neurons.
Right. Well, I didn't know that story exactly, but that somehow our brains sync up with one another, not with any kind of it's not a conscious experience. They just do that.
They just do that. And one of the fun things in my life is dancing. And the way we dance where I go is that we mirror each other,
Mhm.
copy each other. And that's a form
Mhm.
of just what you had with the dancers of your patient and you.
Mhm.
Is like they do the same thing. They connect people for a little while when you're doing that mirroring of each other. And sometimes that mirroring comes in ways that are a little surprising, where what's external mirrors uh, an, a need that you have and maybe a solution to it, the kind of the way you were looking for, like you kept coming up with the same card with the osteoporosis question, but you did find some mirroring with mold toxins. So
Yes, yes. So, I'd love to tell that story because that was really remarkable. I have a blog that I've had since 2011, and I have a couple of thousand readers. And a person wrote to me and said to me, given your other interests, I think that you would be very interested in learning about treating mold toxicity, because it can often present as like psychiatric symptoms. And so I wrote her back and I thanked her and I filed it because I just can't follow up on everything. Um, and it so happened that that year I was doing a teacher training in Kundalini Yoga. And this required that I have a home practice of an hour a day. And I was going down into what had been the children's playroom. It was in a finished basement, that had a carpet. And I was doing this, deep breathing and rapid breathing that was part of the yoga practice. And I started to feel really unwell. I like started to feel very depressed and very anxious, and my ears were ringing, and I was having insomnia and bloating, and I was like, "What is going on with me?" And all of a sudden, it just occurred to me about that patient's email to me, or not patient, that reader's email. And so I went back and I looked at it and I started following all the links and started reading about it. And I said, geez, I wonder if the basement has mold. And there had in fact been some water damage a couple of years before, to the basement. And so I had somebody come in and inspect it. And sure enough, tremendously high levels of mold. And I got the basement remediated. And fortunately for me, I'm one of those people that once I stop exposing myself to the moldy environment, I feel very quickly better. Like I stopped going down the basement because I think I felt too ill to practice. And within a couple of days, I felt normal again. Um, but that occasioned me to learn about treating mold toxicity. And a lot of patients who come to see me are suffering from mold toxicity, and it can often present psychiatrically with depression, anxiety, and brain fog, and all kinds of physical symptoms. Um, and so it has become something that I routinely do in my practice, and I would not have known about it had that, well, maybe I would have found out about it another way, but that reader alerted me to it, and then I had my own personal experience of it, and then learned to help people who have that.
that's that's a wonderful example of how information comes to us. There's the amount of stimuli coming into the brain is incredible, and we can only do a little bit of it. I'm collecting numbers to put those numbers on that, but our consciousness can't process all the stuff that's coming in on us. So we require the reticular activating system probably to filter the information, to pick out salient information to our particular needs. But the fun thing is that it shows up, and that's what's amazing. So you have an interested reader who's sending you something that you might need somehow, or at
Yes.
least
And
use
I didn't
somehow.
know I needed it. I filed it. I didn't look at it right away,
And you
but then I
filed
did
it,
need it.
but you did need it. And this is like empathy at a distance, where the person somehow knew that you intuitively could use that.
Yes.
And these connections through blogs and these videos that I do, and a Psychology Today thing I do, we have no idea how many people are being affected by and how they're being affected by this. Occasionally I hear stories of, you saved my life, not to me, but another video person. I really got to know you, and you, by saying this on your show, made something really positive happen for me. That probably happens for you too with your blog.
Well, I want to say something that stimulates a thought. I was working with a shaman, and I was telling her about my book and my intention for the book and kind of my wish to be able to touch more people than I'm able to like have an impact on just seeing patients one to one in my office. And she said, she really took issue with that. And she said, "You have no idea the impact that you have working with people one to one. You something changes because of your work with them, and then they change in some kind of way, and that affects their family, and then that affects somebody else." And since she said that to me, I mean, she was really kind of stern as she said this to me. And like, I think part of it was that she was feeling like I wasn't valuing enough what I was doing just in my practice. But since she said that to me, patients have been just saying to me again and again in all kinds of different ways what a difference I've made. But it was after she said that to me, like they were proving her.
Yeah, they were proving her. They
Yeah.
were telling you, yeah, you're doing fine with what
Yeah.
you're doing,
Yeah.
because it ripples out. And
Yes, it ripples out. And I can see that, like a person who really was like so depressed and so anxious that really wasn't able to step up to the plate as in his role as a father to teenage children. And now with feeling so much better, he's like so involved and having so much fun, and they're having fun.
that's a very good example. There are other examples, and you may have them, where you've got say a spouse in therapy, and that person in therapy changes, but the spouse doesn't.
Oh,
And
that's very common. That's very common. I mean, that can happen in a very micro way when a person has like an amazing experience with ketamine and they feel so connected and they feel so expanded and so heart opened, and they come back to their family and it's just like business as usual, and their other people are not on the same wavelength, and they need to be prepared for that experience.
do you prepare them for that?
Yes, yes, I say, that might be hard when you go home, that people aren't going to be like in the same frame of mind that you are.
Well, along with that, is what we both probably know, I know, is that after psychedelic experiences like LSD and psilocybin, mescaline, people start having more synchronicities.
Mm.
Well, I interviewed someone who is part of a psilocybin research for depression project in London. Um, and they have a research group, and they do the whole thing very nicely. So preparation, integration, have the thing. There's somebody sitting there with them, or two people. They have music. So they do a very nice job, and people recover from their depression, except some of them get depressed again. And
Yeah.
they get depressed again because they go back to their same environment where people are expecting them to be depressed and don't want them to be, or something, or not used to, or they have to change if they're not depressed anymore.
Yeah.
So I was wondering, and nobody wants to listen to me about this that I can get, that talk to people who are doing psychedelic treatment for depression and other things, to monitor their synchronicities afterwards. Because this woman I was interviewing said, yeah, they have a lot of them. They tell us afterwards they have them. And even the facilitator sitting with the people having the psychedelic experience have an increase in synchronicities. They tell each other about them, but they won't publish it because it's too woo-woo.
Right. Well, people are in the closet about it. Like there's such a paradigm of scientific materialism that um, people like they don't want to be the hanged man. Like they just don't want to be out of the closet.
Even though it's right there in front of them and they can't do it. So they don't. There's a lot of repression going on politically, as more oppression takes place over people who are different, from white what perhaps males like to have the world to be, for example. But what I was trying to suggest was that if synchronicity gets integrated into the post-treatment parts, that those synchronicities offer possibilities of maintaining the the new state of non-depression.
Well, I think that's a great point, and it probably would be a great idea to emphasize like paying attention to that because synchronicities are so uplifting and so affirming.
And
Like what we were talking about, the mirroring, the universe mirroring you and somehow saying, I mean, I know in my own life when the synchronicities start like happening like one after another that I am somehow really in the flow and
yeah,
somehow really attuned to
yes,
um, where I'm meant to be in my life.
yes, yes, yes. That's probably the most common use of synchronicities, is confirming, affirming that you're on the
Mhm.
right path, and makes you feel good.
Yeah,
It's
yeah,
like a parent patting you on the back and saying
absolutely.
things are going right. That's what it feels like. But
Yeah.
what I want to know as we get close to the end of our discussion today, that here you are at Harvard, or around Harvard. I like to say that because I didn't apply to Harvard Medical School because I didn't want anybody to ask me where I went, because I was having trouble then saying Harvard. So I went to Yale instead, which was easier to say, even though it's second rate to Harvard and all that. But here you are in all the things that Harvard isn't.
Right.
John Harvard with his statue would I would maybe turn around over uh, about what's going on at Harvard. But here you are in the midst of a very prestigious place, and you're also a psychoanalyst and part of the Boston Psychoanalytic thing, and you are doing this weird stuff. And I wonder how you navigate tarot, synchronicity, astrology in the political and professional context in which you are finding yourself.
Well, it's not easy. Like one of the things that I do is that I'm invited to be a consultant on one of the inpatient units and interview a patient in front of a group and then discuss the patient. Well, I don't talk about the patient's astrology. I don't talk about pulling a tarot card. Like I just do I'm very well trained conventionally. And so I do kind of more my like psychoanalytic thing. So I leave a part of myself at home, because that would not be welcome and that would be alienating to the group. And I feel like what I do offer them is very much appreciated, so that's okay. I've had a more unfortunate experience with the Psychoanalytic Institute. I wanted to give a talk about my book, and they treated it kind of like a hot potato, like maybe you should like instead of doing a talk, you should like be part of like Meet the Author, which is something that's sponsored by the library. So I wrote to the person who's like the Meet the Author organizer. He just like ignored my email. So like I mean, maybe he didn't see it and maybe I should write to him again. But, I just feel like there's kind of like, don't ask, don't tell, like it's it doesn't feel like because it's so secular and they're so allergic to the word sacred, like I feel as though it just does not resonate and they want no part of it. So it's kind of lonely, if I'm looking for community there.
And where do you find your community?
Well, I find my community with astrologers, with people who are interested in shamanism, um, people who are more on that kind of wavelength.
But not with any psychiatrists.
Not, I mean, I have a group, like, because I do sort of functional medicine stuff, I have a group of holistic doctors. Like, I have a mentor who taught me about mold, but he's very spiritually oriented and very interested in energetic things. So that community of like a Google group is also a community, but not like psychiatrists. Oh, I have one psychiatrist as a friend. His name is Rick Leskowitz. He just um, wrote a book it's going to be published in April. It's called The Mystery of Energy or something like that. And he's exactly, well, we're not exactly on the same wavelength, but very much on the same wavelength. And he's a good ally.
Do you want to have more psychiatric community about weird stuff like this?
I would like that. I would like that, like people who spoke the same language, but it just is so far out. Um, it's just so like it's a different paradigm.
I it's a different, it's an expanded paradigm is the way I would talk about it. It it gets to the question, one of the main questions in psychiatry is the relationship between mind and brain. Have you thought about that one?
Well, I mean, the way that I see it is that, the brain is like a radio, kind of like it's a receiver of consciousness, you know, and consciousness persists whether or not the brain is living or not, and goes on persisting after we die. Um, so I do think about that.
Good. It's an important question because it's fundamental to psychiatry. Is if you can do psychotherapy and you can see brain changes, and then you give people pills and you see psychological changes, that there's some there's some interchange between what we mean as mind and brain. It's probably not just because mind comes out of brain, because it looks like there's something else going on here called consciousness, and we have our own individual versions of that. I think I bring up the question of colleagueship because some of the psychedelic psychiatrists have to get into this, people who do psychedelic treatments, but not all of them. There's a hospital in Kingston, Ontario, Canada, where they wear white coats and they ask patients questions while they're having their psilocybin experience. There's no music. It's a sterile environment.
Mm-hmm.
They just think the pill's going to do it, and they don't
Mm-hmm.
recognize that context makes a difference. So a friend of mine's
Mm-hmm.
trying to like get somebody to wake those guys up, but this is going
Yeah.
on with the delivery of babies and
Yeah.
done in sterile environments rather
Yeah.
than a warm, uh, enveloping environment for the mother and the baby to enter into. rather than the sterile situation that is used. Some people describe using ayahuasca in the Amazon jungle as part of the birthing process, just because it's such a magnificent experience. Both of these instances suggest how medicine is like clamping down on the expansion of potential consciousness in places where that could happen.
Yeah.
I think I bring this up to you because it might be worthwhile for you, it certainly is for me, to try to find other psychiatrists who are interested in being able to band together to say something to psychiatry in an organized way, to say, hey guys, there's something else going on here, and that's to do with the mind.
Well, I agree with you 100%, but also, like there's all kinds of other things that psychiatrists don't acknowledge, like the impact of toxic mold, or like mast cell activation that causes like tons of symptoms of depression, anxiety, and brain fog. There's just all these physical conditions that are not acknowledged. It's just identify symptoms and suppress with a pharmaceutical. That's the paradigm. And it's very broken.
It's very broken, and so is medicine in general, and that's a good
In
example.
general.
Well, we could go on that for quite a while, but I think we have to leave it as like something yet to be done for medicine in general and psychiatry in particular. Was there anything?
Well, you can use your chestnut medicine to help the situation.
That's what I'll do. That's what I'll do. What last comment would you like to make as we close?
Well, I know one thing that I tell myself when things aren't the way that I would like them to be.
Mm-hmm.
I wrote about it in my book. It's from this Buddhist teacher, Ruth King. And she said it's the 3 Ps. And so the first one is not personal. So like not taking things personally, like the Psychoanalytic Institute, like ignoring me. It's not permanent. Like things change. They don't stay the same all the time. And it's not perfect. Like we want things to be perfect. We're not happy when things go wrong, but things always go wrong. So, the 3 Ps, that's like, I turn to them very often for consolation and guidance and wisdom.
Very good. Thank you. Thank you very much, Judy, for talking with me today.
Thank you. I enjoyed the conversation a lot.
You're welcome.
This psychosphere is our mental atmosphere, like a hologram of cosmic consciousness.